the interest from the colleagues here in the different news houses. You are more than welcome. If I may, then, just to give you a flow of events, we will commence with Thomas again. And Thomas will just give us a sense of the grid. The grid had a tough week. The grid had a lot of constraints. We hit a few challenges that were really not foreseen when we met last Friday. I think there's been some work on that. So Thomas is going to just give us a sense of that. After that, Mr. Rudy Dix will give us a taste of some of the nuances from the action plan or actions that have come out well in the last week, or areas that we're still grappling with. And then after that, we'll afford the opportunity to raise questions. As with last week, please feel free to punch them in the Q&A. And secondly, we will again have an opportunity for some voice and a few hands if you would like to at the end of the, when we do the Q&A. So if you'd be kind enough then to use both methods, because of time. I would like us not to be too long today. We are fielding a number of issues. I'm sure you members from the media have got your eye on a few other stories that are emerging. So I'd like us to perhaps be as efficient as we can today and perhaps stick within the hour that we'd hoped to. So without further ado, greetings from my side. For those of you who have not met before, it's Michael Curran from GCIS, the acting spokesperson of government. And I'd like to hand over to Thomas Conradi from Eskom just to give us the sense of where we are. Thank you very much. Thomas, over to you, please. And thank you for being with us again, Thomas.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Are you audible?
Michael. Thank you very much. Yeah, ladies and gents, as indicated, quite a tough week for us, both inside the plant and also outside of the plant. In Eskom, but let me focus specifically on the system and where we found ourselves and what has transpired in the last week and how we also see it from here onwards. As we sit currently, we have got in plant maintenance in the order of 5,012 megawatts. So quite a considerable amount of units still on plant outage. And this pressure on high plant outage will continue for the next month and longer until we get to the point of starting to finish off on the plant maintenance in anticipation for the winter months and also when the demand starts to increase. So currently our unplanned unavailability as we stand is sitting at 15,282. That's the unplanned unavailability. But then we've also have 1,426 other losses, which bring the total to 16,708 megawatts. And that's also relating to still having some coal constraints, both quality issues that we're experiencing at Matla, but then also, and more specifically at Letaba Power Station, where we still got a unit that's not returned to service as a result of coal constraints. And I will delve into a little bit more detail on that. What is of concern is that our risk units, we're monitoring all the plant that is on risk, all the units. We're sitting with 3 units that's having tube leaks currently that we are closely monitoring, and that sooner or later we will need to shut down, being Kriel 6, Matla 4 and Majuba 4, that we need to also consider when to shut them down in order to be able to do that repairs. So that put us at risk for further losses. What we really experienced in earlier this week, actually starting off already last weekend, when we've had quite severe rain in the eastern Mpumalanga, but also around the Vaal Triangle, to such an extent that we've had problems with coal supply at a number of our mines. Supplying the power stations. We've had problems in getting adequate coal towards Camden Power Station and also at Letaba. I need to stretch it that it's not a matter that not having coal on the stockpiles, but with the extended period that we've had very poor weather and lots of rain, we exhaust our strategic stock, our live stockpiles, which are there specifically to deal with this weather, and that we then get forced to start to reclaim of our strategic stockpiles. And what we have seen specifically at the Thabo as the stockpiles been very wet and making it incredibly difficult to get that coal through the processes. We get lots of hang-ups and blockages of transfer points in the feeding of the coal from the mine to the power station, from the stockpile to the power station. The Thabo power station in particular, we've had a situation when we had to go to stage 6 load shedding, that we've had at one stage early this week only one of the 6 units running at Letaba. The Thabo normally one of our more reliable power stations, and really causing a lot of trouble for us in having that capacity not available, and that then forced the unplanned unavailability to very high levels, and forcing us into a situation of having to take the stage 6 load shedding. We've also through that have to extensively dispatch OCGTs, open cycle gas turbines, and also eroding our reserves both on the diesel there as well as on the pump storage, and also not getting opportunity at night time to pump the pump storage dams back to recover some of those reserves. So the situation is that we could manage to, already as from Tuesday, Wednesday, when we see the weather lifting, that we could manage to get some of the mine operations at the Thabo going again, especially on the upper seams. It is an open cast mine, so there was also at some stage with the Vaal River being very high risk of flooding that mine, and then taking into consideration the safety of the mine employees. We had a situation where we could not take any coal from the mine, and we were solely dependent on coal off the strategic stockpile, as I've indicated, being very wet and difficult to handle. But we could manage through the week to recover units, and that we could get back to the 5th unit been synchronizing in the early hours of this morning. We still got unit 4 off that we need to recover also. The coal supply is still not stable as we would like it, and our on-site, on-terrace coal stock is still low at Letaba power station. So we're very carefully monitoring it, not to be over-ambitious in putting units back on load, and by that compromising the running units and force them off again as a result of coal supply. And with all of this said, we left but no choice to continue with stage 6 load shedding today and also tomorrow, in order to be in a position that we can actually recover our reserves, both in terms of having diesel transferred to the open cycle gas turbines, and also to have enough capacity available overnight to be able to pump back the pump storage schemes. But very important also that we really minimize and hopefully get it to zero dispatching of the open cycle gas turbines, not to further consume diesel whilst we're trying to recover. To give an indication, this just a while back today, our diesel levels at Gaurikwa power station close to Mossel Bay was at 53%, and at Ankerlig we were sitting at as low as 36%. And therefore we need to really do the recovery and minimize the dispatching of Ankerlig and Gaurikwa, the open cycle gas turbines, whilst we're in the process of also recovering those levels. What further also troubled us in the week is that we've also lost some of the capacity that we normally import from Cahora Bassa, to the order of about 600 megawatts that we've lost. We've had a pylon failure on one of the lines, one of the feeder lines. One of the pylons has failed. Initial indication is that it looks like there's been some tampering with that pylon and stealing of steel members, causing it to collapse. The team there is working around the clock to recover those pylon, but it's going to take us a few days. So we are also short of that normally very reliable 600 megawatts coming off Cahora Bassa. And with that we are still in a very tight spot, and hence that we can't lift or lower the stages of load shedding as we approach also the weekend. We will further analyze the situation through the run of tomorrow. All depends on how it materializes in terms of the risk units. There's a number of units that need to return also for tomorrow. A big unit like Kendall 6, which we hope to get back tomorrow, and Arnold 2 also still today. That will, given all of these addings, but also the risks that we're running with, we will assess the situation again and duly communicate in terms of the projection for load shedding for Sunday, and then also attempt going into the coming week. So, Chair, to then summarize, to say that we've had a very tough week, and we are acutely aware of what it's doing to the country, what it's doing to the economy in running on stage 6 load shedding for such a long period, causing immense damage, and we're working our best to get out of that situation. We are seeing some improvement. We were hoping that we would have been in a better position by this time around of the week, after we've seen the weather lifting also earlier the week, but there's still risk ahead of us. We're also aware of some storm approaching the eastern coast, and that might impact some of our power stations towards the very far east, in Mpumalanga, Arnold, Indrina, and those. And therefore, we need to err conservative also in terms of making sure that we adequately protect our reserves and recover our reserves to be able to best serve also next week. Chair, let me halt there, and then I will deal with the questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, very kindly for that. Not so good forecast or weather situation in the energy space. Thomas, just before I ask Rudy to give us his broad stroke, do you perhaps just want to reiterate one element that this debate in the public in the week around stage 8? Do you just want to give a reflection on that, if you could, please, Thomas? Just a line or two on that, please, if possible.
Thank you. So yes, as indicated, and Ms. Isabel Fick from Transmission and System Operations side has also indicated that in an earlier media briefing, that we are just updating also our schedules for higher stages of load shedding. We obviously from our side is attempting every means of not reverting towards that stages. I must say that we were close to that earlier this week, and it is finely balanced in terms of a number of factors, and therefore we need to manage it closely. At this stage, we don't foresee to go to stage 8, but we need to be also being responsible and ensure that those schedules are clear. That if the situation forces us there, one must always remember that increasing a stage of load shedding is again with the intentions to make sure that we do keep the demand and supply matched and keep the system stable, and therefore it will be irresponsible not to actually do that preparation work. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Thomas. Very helpful indeed. And indeed, William Horn has already kicked the ball off in the Q&A section. So please feel free, the colleagues from the media. Mr. Rudy Dix, the energy action plan of the week by the week forward, and your thoughts on where we are there. Please, Rudy, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Thomas, for that also. Maybe just before I kick off on some of the more interesting stuff that has happened during the course of the week and what we're looking forward for the rest of the week, I had noticed that there was perhaps a miscommunication last week on the issue related to the transmission license. Now, remember, the transmission license has not been issued, and I thought I'd made that very clear, that what has happened is that there's a licensing application process that Eskom has embarked on, and particularly the National Transmission Company that has been established. And that National Transmission Company, for it to be operational, has to apply for its license or licenses in this case. Now, what has happened during the course of the previous week was that NERSA has given the go-ahead for public consultation on the licensing application. So the license has not been issued yet, but it is on the public consultation on the license. So for every licensee, there is a public consultation process. That inputs are brought back to the regulator. The regulator then makes a final decision on the license application by the licensee, which is the National Transmission Company, and thereafter a license is either given or not. Now, we're still within that time frame. That is going to be by the end of March. So I just wanted to clarify that there's no license that has been issued yet. The licensing application process is being considered, and this is part of the licensee arrangement and the requirements that are going forward. But some interesting stuff that has happened during the course of the week. I thought perhaps the most important part, Michael, has been the debt relief for Eskom, which is an important and significant component for Thomas and the team, the senior executives and others, to be able to ensure that they are, part of it is to ensure that they're able to spend more time and focus on the Eskom recovery plan. This also includes, of course, this is 254 billion rand, which includes a direct over of 70 billion rand. And again, the debt relief has always been a crucial part of the action plan. This is important for us to be able to see much needed investment in maintenance and existing generation, but also for the new investment in transmission, because this is going to be quite critical. As I indicated last week, part of the transmission development plan, Eskom Transmission is in the process of planning to build 2,890 kilometers of new high voltage lines and 60 transformers to ensure that they are able to deal with the grid constraint. Now, that requires about 72 billion rand of investment by 2027, and the debt relief in itself is quite an important part of ensuring that Eskom has the ability to be able to fund those important investments decision going forward. I must say, and I think the minister was at great pains to explain, and if you go through the budget review documents, this debt relief does not come easy. It's not a free lunch, as one would say, but it comes with a whole set of conditions. Those conditions will be determined by an independent assessment that will be conducted by Eskom and by National Treasury. And this would provide specific sets of conditions and recommendations on meeting certain requirements for the entire debt relief package to be fulfilled. And this is going to be quite important that, there is significant performance. There's certain conditions that have to be met to be able to do that. So I think that has been the most important part. And although there may not be a direct correlation, it does have a significant bearing on the ability for us to be able to start investing on a whole set of different things that are critical and crucial to the Energy Action Plan. I thought also the second component was the fiscal support measures, particularly the tax incentives to business and households. We did indicate that as part of our conversations, and the President had given the line of march in his State of the Nation address. And there are three elements here that I think is going to be quite important for us to take note of. The first is just the business will be allowed to reduce their taxable income by 125% of the cost of investment in renewables within the first year. And this is quite an important and significantly strong incentive to drive the rollout of rooftop solar in shopping centers, factories, commercial buildings, farms, and many other places that are going to be quite critical. So I think that's quite an important and strong incentive. The second core part is for small-scale embedded generation for individuals, and they will receive a tax rebate of 25% to a maximum of 15,000 rand, and that would help many households to install their own system or expand existing systems. And then again, as we said, we will continue to work with the National Treasury on the bounce back scheme. And this will be adjusted to provide financing for small and medium businesses to install alternative energy sources. And again, both allowing banks and DFIs to borrow directly. So this is quite an important set of interventions to be able to support and incentivize households and businesses to install alternative measures of energy, clean energy, that they are able to utilize for themselves, including dispatching onto the grid if they can. And that's going to be quite critical going forward. So those are the two critical announcements, I think, importantly so, in our energy action plan. SSEG and the rooftop solar PV has been a critical part of it. And finally, we have a degree of incentives that are in place that we're able to support going forward. And I think that's been critical. We're hoping that there's going to be quite a significant uptake of this, and that we'll see this kind of demand side measure helping Thomas and his team in Eskom to lower the demand on households, lower the demand from households and from businesses. We last week gave an update on the standard offer and the emergency procurement. Just over 400 megawatts of that is being contracted into. That will happen immediately. I've been told that the finalization of this would be later today, and that would be immediately put onto the grid. And I think that's quite important, that those additional megawatts are able to come onto the grid as a matter of urgency. There are others that are currently being considered, and again, contractual negotiations would happen. I can't distinguish between, until we can't give you any details around which parties, until of course the contracts have been signed and concluded, and I've been told that this would happen today. So just a quick update on that as well, Michael. And then of course the big one on the RFP battery storage. We've been able to, as I've also indicated last week, this is for 513 megawatt of new capacity. This is quite an important part of the integrated resource plan in getting this IRP out, and to ensure that we do have a program around battery storage. We know that the IPP office have given us the firm commitment that this RFP will go out by next week, which is the end of February. And so, of course, again, we'll provide an update on the RFP as they go out. We also just finalizing the RFP for bid window 7. And bid window 7 is will in our view we estimated to procure 5,000 megawatts of wind and solar. There are of course several options to be able to ensure that we design bid window 7 to address the constraints that were in bid window 6. We are engaging both between the IPP and Eskom, and ourselves in NECOM are engaging on how best we do this, so that we're able to maximize and not sit with a situation where you only have a limited number of bidders that we are able to conclude and sign. This is going to be an important area. There are options being considered, and these will be announced as soon as we announce bid window 7. You would have also noticed that given the constrained grid environment, that we needed to take some radical steps around grid capacity and how one deals with this constrained environment. Eskom Grid Connection Unit has now issued a revised grid capacity allocation principle, otherwise known to many of you as grid queuing rules, for comment. This has been released during the course of the week to stakeholders for comments and for clarification. We of course have never had to do this, but this has been in a situation where where we needed to ensure that where there are grid capacity allocated, it is not sterilized, right? It is not held by either a private sector embedded generator or an IPP, and the build is years away. Of course, what we require is immediate investment into new megawatts. We need to support the build of the generation capacity to be able to deal with that. These queuing rules are intended to be able to deal with this matter so that everybody has a fair chance to be able to get the cost estimate letters, approve the budget quotes, and then, of course, get building and constructing, or of course, all the authorizations before then also, but get building and constructing as quick as possible. And that's the aim of the attempt to try and deal with that. There are comments that are coming through, some good suggestions, but the grid capacity unit has been liaising with industry players, with those in this environment around this. And I think this is going to be quite an important area. Lastly, Michael, we have also just with the IPP office worked on an estimated surplus capacity from existing IPPs. And this is from existing IPPs that have now received, that have already closed and have already placed their megawatts onto the grid or dispatched their megawatts onto the grid. This is between the 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there we've been able to estimate about 64 megawatts of available capacity that we can contract in. And this is from those previous bid windows. We don't require additional grid strengthening. This is from where there is already a PV or wind or any other form of technology that has been invested on in terms of the bid windows that have been developed over the last 12 years. And where there's surplus capacity that is going to be contracted in, IPP has identified that Eskom would have to enter into contracting around that. Price would probably be much less. You wouldn't have to pay for the initial capex and investment costs. What you are paying for is only for the energy usage, and I think this is quite important. So just a quick update. Well, not a quick one, but this is where we stand with regard to many of the areas that we've identified, and I think the biggest plus has been the relief for Eskom, and of course the SSEG interventions from a fiscal standpoint, and of course very close to closing on the standard offer and the emergency generation program that Eskom has introduced, and that's 400 megawatts, apologies, that could get onto the grid as quickly as possible. Thank you so much, Michael, and I hope that helped give a sense of where we are by the end of this week, okay?
Rudy, I think that your opening remark, members of the media, from Mr. Dix helps give a sense of why these meetings on a weekly basis are so important, because now we've had that quick iteration to refine the matter on the transmission, and you guys have a chance to ask questions, and we don't allow a thing to hang without any sense of clarity. So I think, thank you very much, Rudy. Thank you, Thomas. We've already got a number of questions, one of which I'll field quickly. And I do hope colleagues are then going to use this opportunity then for these kinds of interactions to pick up some of the gaps that may be there from initial responses. So here we start off with one good example, and I would imagine, Thomas, this is for you. Mr. Horn is asking, Netwerk 24, I'm trying to ascertain what's going on with the more than 7,000 megawatts load shedding some evenings. Is it possible that energy saving is influenced by higher than expected energy usage, which means that the application of stage 6 load shedding, as promised, just coincidentally results in higher savings? Or is it in fact a case of load shedding creep, where the system operator is effectively implementing load shedding, is implementing stage 7 without communicating it, okay? And that'll come a bit later again, Thomas. Carol Payton from News 24, in effect, have we not been at stage 8 because Eskom has been shedding over 7,000 megawatts? Is this because of additional curtailment? So a similar caveat to what the previous colleague was asking. How did Eskom manage to move into stage 7 or 8 without formally declaring it? It says Terence Creamer. In other words, how were the additional megawatts of load shedding secured during the 2 peak periods this week without any formal communication? And then secondly, he would like to know, is it correct that the new load shedding framework allows for the regime up to stage 16? What would stage 16 look like, Tomas? William again here, Mr. Horn from Netwerk 24. Who was in charge of setting up the requirements of the debt relief being paid to Eskom as set out in Workstream 3? Thomas, Rudy, you might handle that one, but colleagues, just to say, and Rudy, you might top me up on William's question here, but folks, it was a bit of a short lead time for me. I thought perhaps given the importance, as Rudy pointed to, of the budget speech this week, I had tried to see last night if I could secure one of the Eskom colleagues who's dealing with, the National Treasury colleagues who dealt with this to be with us today from the work stream as well. Unfortunately, it was a very late time call on my part because some of them are already apparently immersed in a series of roadshows that follow the budget. So I assure you that we can do two things. I've got the referral from Clio to indicate that they do have a very agile and a live media queries desk, and I'll give you the address now if you don't have it. And secondly, if needs be, in the week ahead, we could field or arrange some specific interviews for yourselves if there needs to be more. But perhaps Mr. Dix might comment on that. William, again, the ideal goal of what is the ideal goal of megawatt generated to ease pressure on the grid by rooftop solar uptake due to the subsidy announcement for households by the Minister of Finance. So William is looking at a combination. Rudy, you probably have those numbers already, William. We have given thought to that. And we have got some targets, one or two, a little bit ambitious perhaps, but Rudy will tell you a bit more about that. Right, then Terence, the question that I'll field for yourself and for any others who have the same one. Did Andre de Ruyter raise his concerns over ongoing crime and corruption at Eskom with the NECOM? If so, what was NECOM's response? And I'll end off my input on that one, Terence. Deneen Erasmus, Business Day. Thank you. Very nice, interesting question, Deneen. It crossed my mind as well. Tomasz, where is the transmission tower carrying power from Cahora Bassa that was damaged? Okay, so it's a bit of a geography test there, Tomasz. Nokolo, ECR, East Coast Radio. Hello there from my home province where I used to sometimes go there as a very young person on East Coast Radio. Nokolo, regarding Eskom debt relief, Finance Minister indicated that customers should be prepared to pay for electricity upfront. Please tell us what this means, because not everyone will be able to make a payment, as some people are unemployed and receiving grants. So, Nokolo, this one could require that I refer you to the media helpline of the Treasury, because it is a bit Treasury. Obviously, my colleagues might have a stab at that, possibly Mr. Dix. For me, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you might be referring to the concept of the prepaid meterage suggestion. Could you please share the grid queuing rules draft document? So Terence Creamer is asking that question, and it could very well be, Terence, that we might be a little bit ahead of things, but I'll ask the colleague to comment on that. And then Carol Payton, question for Mr. Dix from Carol Payton at News 24. With respect to bid Windows 7, will bid Windows 7 have a compulsory baseload requirement? In other words, a partnership with a battery storage or something, and two, battery storage or something in that range, okay? And number two, if the grid is reserved for bid Windows 7, then will the timeframes for adjudication be accelerated? Because then that grid will effectively be sterilized. So Carol, I think that question is pretty much what we have on the radar. Before I respond to the question that was asked by the former group CEO, or about Mr. de Ruyter, the former group CEO, I'd like to invite any hands that folks have on the chat. If there's anyone who wants, and I'm not going to give preference to those of you who opted to give us a written question, but if there's any voice here who wants to come in, who wants to field a quick voice question, I'd be grateful to take the hand. And thank you for those of you who have taken our briefing live. If any of you have a question, you unfortunately not in studio or in the auditorium, so perhaps one of you online might want. Okay, there's no hand there, colleagues, as for now. So we'll save that for a quick second round if time allows. Terence, and to any other team here on the Mr. de Ruyter's departure matter, I think let's put it to this, let's give it this sense from government's perspective. The whole issue of security and safety in the whole value chain of the Energy Action Plan and in the work being done to stabilize this critical entity and new work that needs to be done with new power generation. features fundamentally. So issues over crime, issues over sabotage, issues over abuse of contractual obligation or contractual arrangements that people have with Eskom, all of these have been very, very much factored into Workstream 6 and are very much on the top of our radar. In fact, in our recent communication, or I think perhaps before a week or two back, we were able to give yourselves a very deep sense of some of the cases that have been opened, some of the investigations that have been initiated. We've given some numbers around that. So I can just say, colleagues, that there's absolutely no gap in the line of sight from particularly Workstream 6, Rudy, I hope I'm correct, as well as the JCPS cluster of government on this matter. Mr. De Ruyter raising the concerns of the crime in NECOM, I mean, certainly something I would comment on, because I certainly as a NECOM member have never had any of that information. And secondly, I mean, I think, Terence, in all fairness, the whole matter of crime by the leadership of Eskom has been put on the table, whether it caveats to some of those issues that Mr. De Ruyter raised in his exit interview on television or his interview there. I don't think I'd want to go there, but this matter firmly on our radar, making solid progress, and we will not stop until those of you out there who think that the energy chain, which is now causing havoc on our society, is up for criminal activity. Your days are numbered, because we cannot have our country destroyed like that. So that's the response there, Terence, and to anyone else who may have had a curiosity around that. But I'm going to ask, Rudy, I see you've put on your camera. Do you want to take the first series?
I wanted to just add, I just wanted to add on your point, Mike, because I think it's quite important. So, I mean, in Workstream 6, Terence, in the safety and security workstream, they've identified and developed an operational plan. Now, that workstream includes the security apparatus of Eskom in the conversations of identifying specific areas that require intervention. So, not Mr. De Ruyter himself, but Eskom on a regular basis have raised these issues in the relevant workstream, and that Workstream 6 that sits with the whole JCPS. And I think it's quite important that these matters have been or are being dealt with. And as Michael had said, there are specific areas where this information, or where there are specific incidences that require, for example, the JCPS to deal with. This has been the case going forward. Others, of course, requires different sets of operations, from intelligence to investigation, to prosecution, to detection. So all these things are have been raised, to the extent that they have raised it with us. If there are anything else, we don't know. But these are the issues that have been dealt with through Workstream 6. And of course, as we said last week, that Workstream 6 and the police has allocated dedicated resources to be able to address fundamentally this. And this has been in place for some time right now. Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
Sorry, folks. Thank you, Rudy. And perhaps, colleagues, at a future session, maybe even next week, we can have a conversation in NECOM. Maybe if it's of interest to yourselves, we could bring one of the workstream members into the discussion as well. And also, I've also been made alive to not only our friends at the newsroom, our friends at ENC, I think it is, but also at newsroom. Greetings to the viewers. Govan Whittles is here, and he just wants to be clear on that question about stage 8. Did we bracket creep, Thomas? The same question raised by Netwerk 24 and by Carol. So we'll come back to you, Mr. Dix. Let's have a look at what you can tell us. Mr. Conradi, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Curran. Let me then try and deal with the questions from Mr. Horn, Ms. Python, and Mr. Creamer, as well as now the latest one that you've added to the list, Michael. Firstly, to say that I need to state it clearly that we have not introduced stage 7 or stage 8 or any higher stages of load shedding. In managing the supply and demand, when we run out of options on the supply side, we need to manage the demand, and that is how we keep the system in balance. And there are various levers in which we can use to manage demand, of which one is load shedding, as we are all but too well known of. There's also what we refer to as load curtailment. That's where we've got specific contracts with some of our larger industrial customers, where we then have contracts with them that we can, when load curtailment is introduced, we can then also shed them from a certain time period, and that can actually run indefinitely until the point that we then lift that curtailment. And then we've also got, as we probably most of us know, is that we do have the facility in some of the smelters that we've got large single users of power, that we can actually shed those for limited hours in order to manage the high pickup of demand as we approach the peaks. With that said, we have introduced only up to stage 6 load shedding thus far. And yes, there might be some, we see some changes in demand patterns, in that we do see fairly high consumption when people do have power. And it's also because then all devices and utilities are running, and you see higher demand for that period. It is not an exact science, in the sense that the load shedding works on specific blocks of demand of customers that get switched off, being municipalities or different areas. And depending on what is the demand in that specific area, that is what has been gained. But as we've indicated previously, it's give or take in the order of 1,000 megawatts that we do get per stage of load shedding. And that is how it has been designed. So when we have seen higher than the 6,000 load shedding, we have earlier this week have also introduced at some stages a load curtailment, where we've introduced stage 4 load curtailment, and that typically also can give us up to about 1,000 megawatts, again depending on what are the actual demand of those customers when we implement that. So I can clearly state it here that we've not had creep or a load shedding band creep in any way, or that we have introduced higher stages of load shedding without notifying the public in terms of that. In terms of the question, in terms of the load shedding framework for higher stages and even up to stage 16, one must acknowledge here that the actual document NRS 048-9, which is the document that governs and deal with load shedding and how it gets applied. There's a work group working on that, which is not only Eskom, but also industry reviewing and updating that document. And as I've alluded to earlier, the responsible thing is to make sure that this document do cater for higher stages of load shedding, and that those schedules are being developed up front, that we got a more systematic approach if we require it, and that we don't then need to jump around. The document is in draft, and it will take some quite time to finalize it, and then also to be adopted by NERSA. In terms of the Cahora Bassa line question that was asked by Deneen Erasmus from Business Day, just to inform you, for those that don't know, Cahora Bassa is the hydropower that we import from the Cahora Bassa scheme. So because of the distance, the power has been imported on 2 DC lines. So it's a bit different to what we are used to in having single transmission pylons, where all 3 phases of the alternating current is being transported on. So you've got 2 DC lines that's running at some places kilometer or distance apart from each other. So it is a more simple line, meaning more easier to erect and repair. Unfortunately for us, that it will not take that long to repair it. So currently the 1 line is basically off, and therefore basically halving our imports from Cahora Bassa. The tower that's in question, the specific transmission tower, is located about 60 kilometers north of Pretoria. and that's where we've had this damage. I've not been here myself, nor I'm also dealing with information that has been shared with me from my transmission colleagues. I think that maybe I've dealt with most of the questions. Yeah, maybe just to also say, in terms of we are in discussions also with National Treasury. National Treasury has indicated to us the requirement that and also some of the requirements for the debt relief. And one of those is that we are engaging with a supplier that was appointed by National Treasury in order to have an in-depth analysis of our operations business. We've already been in discussion with them where they've put down to us the requirements in terms of all the information that they require, and we're in the process of also submitting that information. So we are giving our full cooperation from Generation side also to work very closely with this supplier. In fact, we welcome that also to get their insights and their views on our business and where they believe we can do it differently or better in order to recover the situation. Chair, I think I will pause there to allow for other questions also.
Thank you, Thomas. And then Rudy will come in. And while I will go to round 2 in a minute, but you can read so long, Thomas, if you have access to it. The additional question now from Deneen and from a newcomer called Paul. I'm not sure which house you are, Paul, Media House, but you can tell us. But over to you, Mr. Dix.
Thank you, Mr. Karin. So just building on Thomas's point around the debt relief, asset and liability management deals with the debt relief, and the head of asset and liability is Dr. Duncan Peterson-Williams. So this is where it lies, and this is the work that we are doing, that they are doing. I am also just, very happy there is lots of coordination between the reform program of Eskom, because a lot of the reform programs of Eskom that Operation Vulindlela drives is quite critical for some of these conditions. And so, of course, there is a constant work and a strong partnership between ourselves at Operation Vulindlela and the asset and liability management team at National Treasury on ensuring that we're able to support Eskom, and these support measures are important in terms of ensuring reforms and the particular conditions that asset and liability management will set is going to happen. On Carol's question, Carol, yes. No, I think that what Bid Window 7 will do is for both wind and PV. I think it's important for balancing the system, and that's why it's quite critical that we need to find the spots on the grid where there is. I know the transmission chaps are looking at whether there are also opportunities on the coast. If there are, that may be the case. So it's expected that the bid would look at wind and PV again. Yes, and it's been a major concern for us, and I've raised this with you before, that the time it takes for a RFP for the preferred bidders to submit the bid documents, or bidders to submit the documents to a decision on preferred bidders, to decision on the contracting and the PPA and the guarantee and the IPP. It is absolutely not on that we spend 18 months to 2 years simply to do that. So we have had an engagement with the IPP office, but remember also there are 3 other counterparties that requires these things. It's an actual fact, the bidder itself, it's the National Treasury, and it's, of course, Eskom. And what we're hoping to do in the design of Bid Window 7 is to ensure that in the back end, we are able to expedite and ensure that we get that cut down by many, many months. And I think this is the commitment as part of the conversation that we've had with the IPP office and with the counterparties that would have to assign, that we try and deal with it as quickly as possible. Or, as you say, I mean, otherwise people will have to sit and go through cost estimate letters and budget quotes, sit on that, and they're unable to continue without doing that. But bidders in the IPP program generally were decided upon would have to get the necessary authorizations and permits and then move towards the grid connection component. So what we need to do is shorten the time frame from when the RFP issues to the actual signing and conclusion of a PPA, and then of course for the bidder or the IPP to move as quickly as possible into construction and to dispatch. So I think that's the thing. Terence, right? We'll share with you the grid queuing rules, and that will be okay. Notolo, yes, I think it's going to be quite important, and I think again the minister had emphasized that if we are going to give debt relief to municipalities, there has to be a culture of payment for electricity, for utilities and services, and that's going to be important. That people would have to pay, businesses must pay, households must pay. And if that's part of the conversation for debt relief, it's going to be quite critical. What the idea here is of course to introduce and ensure that households switch to prepaid meters. Now, how do we deal with indigent households is precisely why we've introduced many years ago and need to ensure that it is implemented across municipalities is the free basic energy component. And that free basic energy component is quite an important contribution to support low-income households or indigent households where they're unable to afford to buy that. And again, the minimum is 50 kilowatts an hour. This is 50 kilowatts that is provided, sorry, not an hour, 50 kilowatts that is provided as an FBE component. Some of it varies from municipality to municipality, depending on the level of indigency. You get up to 75 and others to 100. But it's important that where we introduce these conditions, that we continue to support low-income households and households that may not be able to afford electricity. But the principle of introducing prepaid meters is going to be an important area going forward. And I think that's going to be quite critical. And then Terence, we've answered that one on the NECOM one. Okay. I think that covers all the ones, Brahma.
Yes. Thank you, Rudy. And colleagues, if I can just raise two quick ones before I take the other round. Firstly, I mean, perhaps to be, if I may, on the question that Rudy has responded to now. Obviously, there is the free basic service basket. I mean, the listeners of East Coast Radio, I hope that in the greater province, you know that the service has really assisted a lot. We are looking at how we did with Business for South Africa, Community Constituency, NEDLAC, Trade Union Movement. You'll all remember how we were able to pull together around the vaccination initiative as well as the COVID. And it was because the media were very helpful in terms of partnering with us. We are trying to raise some resources to raise public understanding that it's very important to pay. And I mean, the point made, Nokolo, about it's difficult to pay for your services if you don't have a job or an income. It's a balancing act. So maybe one of the things I'd like to pose to this meeting as well is, maybe from your side as the media, how do you assist us in terms of building the public case or the understanding of the importance of paying services? Obviously, bearing in mind that there are other mitigating circumstances. But generally, I don't think it would be possible for us as government to say that every single other non-payer is indigent, So this culture of payment, when you should pay and when you have to be a good citizen, with the way in which we've generated tax revenue that's increased so much, as you heard from Mr. Godongwana this week, is because there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of awareness, there's a lot of measures that the Treasury's put in. So I'm really putting that out here. But this is a conversation that I'd like us to have on a Friday. That we see what you can assist us with, because there's no way that the billions that are owed to Eskom are going to just be something that they can absorb and then still be a functional entity, So also then allow me to indicate that it's Paul Burkhardt from Bloomberg who has brought the other question. And with that, I also want to say greetings. I'm also informed that we have our public broadcaster team live with us this afternoon. So SABC viewers, good afternoon to you. Newsroom, ENCA, we're very delighted that you're all with us this afternoon. So there's two more questions then. Paul is asking from Bloomberg that on the spokesperson's Twitter account, Thomas, he said that we're on 7,000 megawatts twice this week, which is understood as stage 7, and therefore also this load curtailment lever it sort of appears that why don't you include that in your stats? Because it looks like if it's a lever, it's not giving a proper account of the load shed. And then Deneen asks a question, which I'm not sure, Rudy, if we have enough detail. You perhaps have a Workstream 6 report, but Deneen, if not, we can definitely find a way to respond to that. What follow-up has been on the 45 individuals recommended for criminal investigation in Parliament's inquiry into Eskom report and the Zondo Commission report? So we know of those 45, and some of them recently arrested in other activities there. And then before I take the hand over to the two gentlemen, I'll take one hand. Mr. Horn you've been a very busy bee this afternoon. Thank you, William, for your enthusiasm, but your hand is up, and let's give you an opportunity to field your question either by voice or any other technique at your availability. William, let's hear from you. Team, maybe you need to unmute or something so that William can raise his question, because it would be interesting to hear that as well. William, can you have a go, Mr. Horn? Okay, let's not tarry. William, perhaps you'll have to resort to your Q&A box, but we'll work on it while Thomas and Rudy field those new questions or comments. Let's give you an opportunity then to type it in the chat, and we'll come back to you if possible. I know that Mr. Thomas Conradi, myself, and Mr. Dix are good to look at, but I think maybe it would be nice to see some other members of the media as well who could give us a run for our money. So team at GSAS, please work on that so that we can, if necessary, we can enable the hands and one or two questions from colleagues from the media, not in the chat, which I think is good, but it wouldn't be bad to hear a few voices. So Thomas, over to you, please. And most of them are in your ambit. And then Rudy, if you want to do a wrap up for the day from your side, then we'll move on. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Curran. On the question from Mr. Burkhardt from Bloomberg, as I've alluded to earlier in the feedback also, that the 7,000 megawatts that was indicated is a combination between the stage 6 load shedding that we've incurred and then also the load curtailment. As I've indicated, there are a number of different levers that we can apply in terms of demand management, and not to confuse, we are not communicating on all of those at all time. So I think in terms of what has been stated in the tweet, it was a combination between that of the stage 6 load shedding at that stage, combined with the load curtailment that we've implemented. To just touch on the question also of Ms. Deneen Erasmus, just to say that these are there are a number of investigations that's currently on the go in Eskom, and for obvious reasons, those investigations are done in confidence in order to make sure that we can capture all the information and that we do have proper cases in Eskom before those will be considered to then take further action on that. In some cases, there have been some cases action taken, but one needs to allow the process also to for these investigations to be concluded in order to be determining if there are prima facie cases to take against any individuals in the organization. But certainly working closely also with the authorities in terms of conducting those investigations. Let me conclude there. Thank you, Mr. Curran.
Thomas, thank you very much, and thank you for your availability for us today as well. And on that one, I'll just indicate perhaps what we can do there, colleagues, is we can have a chat. I'll ask the team of GSAS who works with Mr. Dix's team and with Mr. Conradi and Dato's team and Sikonati at Eskom. Maybe we could have a little insert on the progress on JSE's issues. Like Thomas says, colleagues, you all know in the media that sometimes when we go up public, we go, etc., it can cause the case to be compromised. So we are always, as communicators, we always want to give you the news because you are our partner. But sometimes our JCPS colleagues have to pull us back a bit and remind us that sometimes communicating can be a risk. I'm sure you all know that as senior journalists. So please note, we'll keep that on our radar. Mr. David Jacobs and his team from my side who work on this, we'll keep it on our radar and speak to Rudy and see if the bright point can come. We've got very capable colleagues. We've got Calais at Eskom. We've got a range of senior leadership from the JCPS cluster. I'm confident that at a point we can invite them to come and give us a synopsis, Deneen and others. The last question what William was going to raise was a simple one, that this report that Mr. Durator gave of the 3 gas, the proposal to convert power stations to gas. Now, Rudy, I don't recall that being something that I'm aware of, but obviously you would have a better insight. So perhaps if you could just field that final question for the day, please, Mr. Dix.
No, this is not part of the NECOM conversations, but this is part of the Just Energy Transition conversations. And remember, Eskom has a Just Energy Transition unit that's there. They're looking at a number of options, including specifically as we decommission for those plants that are being decommissioned on repurposing. And I think this is quite important. So very much similar to what we did at Komati on repurposing. There are options being considered as part of this conversation as to what happens for the next set of plants that would have to, of course, have run their life, right? If there's, again, this is important. So these are not part of the energy action plan. This is part of the overall conversation that we're having on the Just Energy Transition. And if, William, I think it would be useful for you to go into the Just Energy Transition investment plan that we launched last year that is currently being under consultation. And you'll see some of the options that are being considered around repurposing, including some of the options that you've suggested right now. But these are all considerations that we would have to look at. Komati has showed us a way of some form of repurposing with investment in PV. There are other options that are being considered, and this has to have be a joint conversation with the whole of government and of course Eskom in the center of that, as to whether these particular power stations that have run the entire life and end of life have a purpose and can be repurposed going forward. So I think that just would be important. Mike, just in closing, I thought that again, I just wanted to say to colleagues and to the media here that I think these sessions are important for us to provide you critical updates as we go along in implementing the Energy Action Plan. We stick with the Energy Action Plan. We're not going to develop any new plan. We're sticking to that. Many of the interventions right now, as you know, are starting to bear fruit. We see the megawatts coming on slowly but surely, but much of this would lay the basis for future investment in large-scale utility and megawatts, additional megawatts getting onto the grid as a matter of urgency. We have to stick with it. We have to ensure that we implement it. So thank you, Mike. I thought I'll just end with that comment.
Thank you, Mr. Dix, very kindly. Members of the media, thank you very much for your time. I just want to conclude again by reinforcing that point to say that I think the media, the message we would give as especially my role as the government spokesperson, and obviously the gas issue really is clarified very nicely. But I think what we want to carry across to yourselves and to the nation is that the pace at which this has been happening is being escalated and really pushed, because we know that the impact on our economy is severe. So what we are looking at doing is to make sure that we explore all sorts of options as quick as we can to ensure that we can bring the relief. Some of them might be temporary, and as Rudy says, others might be more structural and longer term. But please, the key message is that energy crisis is top of our agenda. The aim is to unlock the rest of the problems that it causes on the economy and on our social life. I really want to say to yourselves, your participation and our commitment, I hope that we will have no disruptions, but on a Friday afternoon at 2, let's make it our date, 1 hour. And we really, really hope that we will be able to address things there. I've given you the email address again for those of you who might want to follow up on some of the details from the Treasury, media@treasury.gov.za, where you can pick up those questions around the budget and some of the nuances of the money that you might want to, particularly from the business reports, pick up a bit of detail on. So, ladies and gentlemen, to my colleagues, gentlemen from the ESCOM, Mr. Thomas Conradie, Mr. Rudy Dix from the presidency, the project leader, and to all of the colleagues in the media, thank you very much for availing yourselves. And I really do hope this is assisting in giving more frequent and better information that would assist you to do your critical job in keeping our nation informed. So until we meet again, I wish you all a pleasant weekend and hope that we'll meet again soon. Thank you very much. Let's stay positive. We will crack the energy crisis and live to a day where we can see our country having so much energy, we're going to export it all over the world. So thank you very much for your time. Let's meet again soon. Thank you very much.